Good evening, everyone. I'm pleased to bring a presentation of an update of mathematics, literacy, specifically reading and writing, and science, with pre-pandemic information and post-pandemic information, and our response in support of students. You will note that it is a report in your package starting on page 15 to 57. So this is an overview of the detailed report for you. So on the first slide here, I'm going to highlight EQAO results. And I'd first like to start off with a proviso that the primary and junior and intermediate assessments are incomparable to the past. So they should not be compared because the mode of the test and the test scoring method, so the mode of the test has been digitized for one, so it's been modernized, and the scoring method of the test, which has taken a form of a computer adaptive form. When students are taking a test, it starts at a medium hard range and then adapts accordingly to the student in response to their questions, is very different from the previous test that was in place, as well as the question types are not the same. For example, in mathematics, there are no longer open response questions. They have multiple choice questions, but in multiple forms. So they have single response, multiple choice, as well as drop down menu and drop and drag, which is not at all what the students would have ever been acclimatized prior to this digitized assessment. So I just really want to make that aware to people. So you'll see on the slide that pre-pandemic, our scores were 56 and 52 for grade 3 mathematics. 56 and 47, and then respectively moved to 52 and 41 with a drop of 4% and a drop of 6%. So the pandemic had an impact on the assessment or the results of the assessment, but I also think the new assessment is something for the students to get used to. So it's very difficult because you're not comparing apples to apples, you're comparing apples to oranges. In addition, prior to the pandemic, we do system monitoring in the system. So in 2018-19, and you'll see this on page 17 of the report, that we had prime assessment conducted in 29 of our schools with our math leadership and learning project schools and our coaching schools. And it was focused on grade 3 and 6 students, and it also conducted a survey around teacher confidence in the area of teaching mathematics. And the results from this survey in 2018 were being compared to the survey that we conducted during the math task force. Post-pandemic in 2020-21, also on page 17 of the report, the prime assessment was conducted in 10 of our schools, and we focused specifically on grade 2, 5, and 8. And there was a shift in the target of students, specifically in trying to preempt and provide more targeted opportunity to students in advance to them taking the assessment. In 2021 and 22, prime again was used as the tool, and it was conducted in 13 of our schools with grades kindergarten, year 2 of kindergarten, 1, 2, and 3. And we shifted that way because our resources in human capital were shifted to the primary area. So you'll see on page 9 of the report that 19 of the report, that there's a demonstrated change in the score moving from 3.9 to 4.5 in average on the prime assessment. So I have to state too, the prime assessment, the one challenge that we have in mathematics is we don't have a universal tool to measure. So it makes it super difficult. And prime measures a range, not a grade, a range in mathematics. And then in this year, 2022-23, with that post-pandemic data, we've shifted to Knowledge Hook. Because the test has been digitized, we've gone to a digitized format of doing a pre and post assessment. So we've gone to 13 schools, and with grades 3 to 8, they do a launch test with the students, and it's in response to the EQAO change of format. We've done pre-data assessment, you'll see on page 19 of the report, but we haven't done our post-data assessment. Actually, a message just went out, and that collection will be happening during this month. In response to what has happened during the pandemic and the aftermath of it, The priorities in mathematics have been specifically in re-engaging and re-inspiring the math vision that was espoused with the math task force, and support of the implementation of board resources. We're a very heavily rich resource board, and it's about fidelity of implementation and use of those resources. So that is the space that we've taken on in doing that work. Support of the implementation of the new curriculum, because that was released during the pandemic, which was challenging for our dedicated teachers, and also in support of the implementation of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, NCTM, the 8 effective teaching practices to build mathematical proficiency with teachers, again, part of the math task force work, and address significant gaps in recovering from the pandemic. And of course, we used tutoring dollars to help to enhance as well. So what did that look like? We provided, particularly this year, System PD with 3 math leads and the LST. Principals couldn't go to the sessions because they were needed to be in the building due to shortages in staff. So, but the teachers were hungry for the learning, like very hungry for the learning, and it was wonderful for them to engage in professional development. Those sessions were followed with what we call school-based learning days. So after they go as a team, they learn together, then they go back and implement some ideas, and then they regroup at the school to deepen their learning around the implementation of the resources and the strategies. We also had early intervention coaches in 13 of our schools. Those are 5 people. Again, the focus is in the area of primary, and then early intervention teachers, we use some of the tutoring dollars to support that, and that was highly effective. You'll see on page 20 of the support of the report, the demonstrated impact of the early interventions teachers ranged from 87.2 to 97% of the percentage of students demonstrating improvement, with an average increase for students from 19% to 30% improvement. So that was very, very effective. And then we also had the review of our resources. So we had to align a new resource. We had been waiting and waiting and waiting for the math curriculum to come out. And we just, I presented this just recently with a math update, but we have Mathology for junior level teachers to be implemented for the start of the year. We're releasing that for teachers who are interested now and starting to dabble with the use of the resource, and PD also in the summer. The intermediate resource review ends this month, and then we will be launching the primary resource review, and that's done in a collaborative fashion with teachers from our classroom from across the system who volunteer and say we want to engage in the work to determine what that tool is. Boots on the ground in the classrooms, giving us honest feedback. And then also we had a secondary math coach as well. So for reading and writing, okay, I'm going to make the same proviso again. The assessment is not the same. For the OSSLT, it's also incomparable to past years. The mode of the test as well as the questions were not the same. The testing period was different. There was a 6-week testing period for the EQAO assessments, and then there's 2 periods of the OSSLT in secondary, so very different. Now you see the results there that for grade 3, pre-pandemic 71, reading went down to 67, so there was a drop of 4%. For grade 6, there was a drop of 2%. Grade 3, there was a drop of 10%, and grade 6, there was a drop of 1%. And we think that the digital assessment did have an impact with that. There's a lack. Actually, our data showed that many of our students did not have a computer device, which I think impacted in right now in our schools where the IT department has worked furiously to continue to build that in our schools, but that takes time coming in after the pandemic. So the kids don't have as much time using the digital equipment as maybe they once did. So we feel that that's had an impact. It's also interesting, the face of the assessment is very different as well. So pre-pandemic in 2018-19, sorry, I didn't flip the slide there, my apologies. In 2018-19, we did a system-wide assessment with writing where we collected sample writing from marker students from every school in the board in elementary, and we moderated that work with central office staff and teachers from schools, and we shared those results as a benchmark for schools. That year we couldn't do writing PD. There was ramping up of job action, and we weren't able to release for professional development, and there was no reading monitoring that occurred that year due to a lack of funds, but there was Lexia support at that time, so we did have one good iron in the fire there. Post-pandemic, reading moderation for students from grades 2, 5, and 8 and 15 of our schools were conducted, but we could not do writing PD that year once again. It was halted. So I'm going to make a statement, and I've said it before, so for those of you who have heard me say it, the repercussions of the lack of professional development will rift in the system for years. The investment in staff is really, really important, and I know our teachers are eager to continue to learn and refine their craft. And then we had the reading moderation use of DRA with students that year. And you'll see on page 26 of the report, there was an average gain of 26 to 49%, and that is of 8 levels or more in the DRA assessment. But they were smaller groups of students that we assessed. So it was a small sample size. And then in 2021-22, student writing in both French and English, and I've presented this previously, it was in grades 4 and 7. Again, a smaller group of from 36 schools though. English reading assessments with all year 2 kindergarten students through to grade 3 using Quick Phonics Screener and Sound Foundations, and then French reading assessments with EDAPAL, and year 2 with grade 2 to grade 2 students in 6 schools. So that's when we were just starting, we were doing the advanced work of the science of reading, be preemptive to the report happening. And then in 2023, actually, you'll see the levels of the writing on page 27. But in 2022-23, the reading assessment in 9 of our English schools and 1 of our French schools, that's when reading, the science of reading really got stronger, and all students were assessed in kindergarten, year 2 of kindergarten through to grade 2. We had a pre, mid, and post assessment. That post assessment hasn't been yet collected for May. It's in the process of being done. And you can see on page 28, there's an increase of 52 to 64% increase of 10% or more with those assessments. So there's some really good work happening with the reading work in our schools. Writing was canceled again this year due to the lack of availability to release teachers. And we look forward, however, to building the writing in with the reading PD next year, because we have to find ways of reaching our staff with this work. The elementary response included a review of all reading interventions with a focus of the science of reading, including our book rooms. The book rooms haven't all been revamped, but we have the resources for that, and we hope to do that towards the end of this year now and into the fall. There was a pilot with 10 of our schools with the Acadience tool and EDAPAL for French. And I want you to notice, though, that I think it's on page 36 and 37. You'll see, and I wanted to just explain this to people, that you'll see that there's different scales that are used, and you see the red may increase. So I want to express students are improving, but the target is moving at different points of the year. So although it may look like students are digressing, they're actually improving when we drill down to individual student reports, but it's the target that's moving throughout the year. I hope that makes sense. Okay? They are getting better when you look at the drill down data, but when you look at the overall, unless I wanted to break confidentiality about individual students, that's the best that I can share publicly. But because that target is moving, it's not necessarily evident there. We also did purchased Haggerty Phonics Awareness, as well as UFly, the University of Florida Institute Foundations resources for grades 1 to 3. B for reading for kindergarten, Pratique Phonétique, and Sonograph for immersion schools. New book room materials for French and English, including decodable books. We created a Brightspace module called Growing Literacy with all of the resources and all the modules in there for at your fingertip support for teachers, as well as the development of instructional videos for principals to use with teachers, and the purchase of SOAR reading kits for every classroom, including our LST and RISE classrooms. And then, of course, we had our early intervention coaches and our early intervention coaches and our early intervention teachers that we had for a short period that were our tutors. For secondary, there was an expansion of the Lexia program, which was fantastic, a creation of digital resources to guide and support the OSSLT, predictive data, and I really need to acknowledge the work of Jason Lin in that process and helping schools to determine trajectories of students from grade 3 and 6 to grade 9. And then our special assignment teachers, they visited over 150 teachers throughout the system, promoting research-based practices and strategies, as well as development for locally developed English teachers and lunch and learns across the system and books to support diversity and equity. So for science, There is no assessment for science that we use. However, we do participate in the International Assessment of Trends in Mathematics and Science, the TIMSS. And we do participate. We're not able to determine what our scores are, but just for your interest, in Ontario, we scored 523 as a mean, which was over and above the score of 500 in Canada, and 524 in the province of Ontario. And in Ontario, that was for grade 4, and then in grade 8, in Ontario, we had a mean score of 522 when the international score was 500, but Quebec was a little bit higher with 537. So what's new with the science that happened just last spring is the new curriculum with changes 1 to 8 and the de-streamed grade 9 science curriculum was all released in May for implementation 2022 September. And so what's new in the curriculum? So the biggest highlights are there is a component around the new science and engineering design processes, and that's really about identifying an issue, a problem, exploring ideas through inquiry about possible solutions, developing a plan, and developing prototypes, and then actually experimenting if the prototype works, and then going back to the drawing board until you get a prototype that works. So it's really a great process for students to engage in. They have had a reduction in the number of expectations in the science curriculum, and there's also a component around climate change. And then the new curriculum includes that highlight of the science and engineering design process, as well as coding skills, trades, and emerging tech in the curriculum. And in the science grade 9 de-streamed, the changes are very similar, with a focus on connecting science to the changing world, including the economy, and in addition to focusing on technology, society, and the environment. And there's an integrated approach to developing a language of science literacy for students. And then there's new skills included around STEM skills and connections and contributions to science and technology, as well as that engineering design and hands-on experiential learning with climate change. And that component around Indigenous education and perspectives is really looking at things like conservation of water and access to clean water from that perspective. So what did we do in response to the change of this? Of course, this, unfortunately, I should say, this comes with no money attached to it, but we did do our very best to bring information to teachers. So we offered sessions in the summer around the modernized science curriculum, and then in the fall, we invited teachers from every school, a primary, junior, and intermediate representative, to engage in learning around the new curriculum. Again, very, very positive received by teachers. They want to engage and do that learning because they want to do the right work in the classroom. And then professional development for our secondary panel included 6 mini workshops where they invited members from each secondary school. In some of our larger schools, they got to send more people. Then there was a February 1st session that was pre-recorded around STEM and tech and skilled trades, and there was a hands-on component to that for all of our teachers. Even that teach beyond STEM courses. And then we just had science-specific PD at the University of Windsor. There were 9 sessions facilitated by the University of Windsor professors and the science people here from our board, which was extremely well received by our teachers, actually last Friday. And then tutoring. The ministry presented a scaffolded approach to the release of funding around the tutoring funds, and we did our very best. Boards were scrambling across the province to try to make that work because it was a real scaffolded approach to the announcement. So we had in-person tutoring. The best that we could do was we put posts out to the system, because the idea was, I'm a teacher in a classroom, I'm finished teaching, I close my door, I walk up the hall, and I'm teaching students in my school which I already have relationships with. So we had that in quite a number of schools. We also offered a virtual homework help online, which was like, I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I'm frustrated. What do I do? Click, click, and somebody is available to you, either French or English, that we offered for a predominant amount of the year. Knowledge Hook also offers a tutoring component. We continued our Open Minds tutoring program and tutoring to our Black students, as well as the Black, African, and Caribbean students Lexia tutoring program that was supported through special education, and our after-school Lexia tutoring program that was supported through special education and derived from the work of working with the IEAC. We worked with some of our community partners the Learning Disabilities Association, and the United Way. And then we had our school-based, in-school, during school time, providing small group instruction to students that were very effective. And then we offered it in our summer learning program last year, where hundreds of students had direct support for literacy and numeracy every morning. So essentially we worked with, sorry I didn't show that, essentially we worked with about 1,900 students across the system with our tutoring program, not to mention the tutors that were, the students that were impacted through our Knowledge Hook program, which was well over 1,000 students. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I know Trustee Burgess is in the queue already.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I have a few, and some of them were answered, with the rest of it, so that's great. Let me get the pages because I made notes. This is a broad question, but you talked about how the nature of EQAO and assessments were, and that there was something that generated like a computer kind of median and adapted or whatever. So my question is actually, I'm just going to use the easy word and say Chat GPT. But, will assessment tools like Chat GPT kind of things, things that generate English language, I guess there's a francophone version, I don't know it, help in any way or skew things for writing assessment when a test is in progress and you don't have access to software like that? Or will it help our teachers assess some things in any of this diagnostic stuff in order to help move things forward? Because writing is always something that we have struggled with historically. I'm just concerned, reading, obviously, all of it, but I mean, writing is something that we just can't seem to kind of break the thing. And I'm wondering if there's any risk areas associated with it, or if there are areas that need PD or support.
So I'm going to talk about the assessment. One of the changes with the assessment is that students have access to tools within the assessment, all digital tools. So you can have the assessment read to you. That's one of the tools that they have. Yeah, they do. There are measurement tools, there are calculators, there are all kinds of tools that are accessible to students. But I think one of the challenges is becoming familiarized with this new assessment, because I think there were some children that were, and we watched it happen, click, 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 like we can't intervene while they're answering the test. But we've done an investment this year in PD for all grade 3 and 6 teachers in supporting the students in preparation for the assessment and the practice assessment, so that and there's another piece, there's a progress bar on it, and it's digital, and it kind of almost looks like a game, in that it stars as you're progressing with the test, which makes you think that you are achieving well, but all it's indicating is that you have progressed and completed the question. So students need to get back in the habit of going back and reviewing their work, but the digital assessment makes them feel like, oh, I've got this, so we'll just go on to the next thing and don't go back and reassess, type of thing. So in terms of GBT, you can speak to my colleagues. We've had a cursory conversation about GBT. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to it, but I personally feel that's something that we need to embrace more rather than fight, because yeah, assistive technology is here to stay.
Any other questions before Trustee Shin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. And this is my 5th year to be a trustee. And as far as I know, since I was a trustee, the math level is decreasing every year, almost every year. So I think it has caused our concerns about how we could, give quality education and put the students' achievement first. So and also based on the provincial government that they are making the legislation that we are taking action to refocus Ontario's education system on what really matters, strengthening reading, writing, and math skills. Our proposed legislation would center the education system on preparing students to succeed in life and work, putting more highly qualified educators in the classroom while ensuring parents have the information they need at their fingertips to support their kids. And those kind of new change of our legislation. So and also based on we have a budget consultation survey report. Even though it's regarding the budget, it still shows a lot of opinions from parents and from communities, stakeholders, their concerns. And a lot.
Excuse me, Trustee Kin, is there a
Okay.
question there? Just is there a question? We need a question to come out.
My question is that we have concerns about the PD days. The teacher complained that we have too much anti-racist PD. Our school and board do not require this much. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I know. It's regarding education. What I mean is that the opinion is from the community. It's from the government and also from the community. So I wonder if we to fulfill this
Point of order,
fulfill
Madam
this
Chair.
kind of
Point of order. Could you clarify whether or not PD directives are not part of a collective agreement and provincial initiatives that we have some restriction in order to direct our staff?
Absolutely, especially at this time. And I know Superintendent Howard is sharing with us everything we are doing. If you just have to listen and get excited and embrace all that she's doing within her powers right now to get our kids up to speed and all the work she has done. And if you have a question, you really need to get to it because we have other questions coming.
My
Okay.
point, madam, was that it's part of a collective agreement. We can discuss what were directed from the provincial initiatives that we must have in our limited number of PD days. That's my question, for point of order.
Okay, my question is that how can we really accommodate this kind of change and fulfill the objectives of both the government and the communities to focus on really quality education and student achievement? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. I would start by saying that families and the district school boards across the province, including the Greater Essex, and the ministry has always had a focus of improving student achievement. I don't think that has ever wavered. Even prior governments, the whole time prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, there's a focus on improving student achievement and also student well-being and inclusivity for all students. So there are a limited number of professional development days. We do get a directive from the ministry indicating these are the things that we want you to cover that far supersede the number of professional development days that we have. So it's like a puzzle, and it's not my work, it's the collective work of the senior team in doing this work and working earnestly with our unions and working with our teachers and our support staff and administrators to make this a reality in our system with many complications coming through continuously, including a global pandemic that kind of fell in between there, right? And so no sooner do we start to gain momentum that something is happening. And I'm not making excuses. I'm not making excuses at all. It's complicated work. And when you're talking about fidelity of implementation of programming and resources and program, that is no easy task to do with a staff of almost 5,000, of which almost 4,000 are teachers and support staff. And they want to do the good work. But there's lots of things that are happening in between there that make it challenging. And not only to mention students coming through a pandemic and staff coming through a pandemic, whereby we need to prioritize Maslow over Bloom. We need to consider the well-being of our students and the well-being of our staff. So in saying that, it's a priority for everyone. I think we're all on the same team here. We want to do the good work, and we need to work together to do that. And the only way that we can do that is to keep open lines of communication and keep the focus on the work. And that work also includes equity and inclusion.
Trustee Burgess had a supplemental first. For Trustee Chin, any others? Any others? Go to your second question, Trustee Burgess, and then I'll give Trustee Chin hers.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question is about EQAO because there have been so many remarkable differences. I wonder if we kind of draw a new datum line, you know what I mean, and say, this is a fresh start, like rebrand it something else, because you said incomparable. When I think of something that's incomparable, I think it's, wow, that's incomparable, marvelous. No, it's, then you clarified it by saying you can't compare. It's very difficult. So I appreciate seeing pre-pandemic. I saw post-pandemic, and I would say 21, 22 wasn't post-pandemic, but I know what you mean. It means the pandemic has started, so, we're in the thick of it, and things are different. Learning is different, you're at home with a device or whatever. I want to ask about the other thing, though, that should, even if we start with that new datum line and we've got EQAO, it's on page 26 of our package, and I think is that 26 of the report or just our package maybe? 26 of our package maybe. So in the past, all students, including those who didn't participate and those who were exempt, were counted in the overall school and board scores. Now it's only the fully participating students who are counting towards those overall scores. Absent and exempted students are counted as no data rather than having a score of 0. That's a remarkable change for us. Like, it's a huge change for us because we always counted everybody. And I would say that for the 72 school boards across the province, not everybody had that practice. You could say even ethic for that matter, but many boards encourage students to just stay home for the day because, rather than, it was better to be absent than try something, and then they weren't counted, and we always counted ours. So how is that going to affect us? Because that is new, so we would be looking at something different.
I see that as a good change. It's something that we advocated for a long time, and in particular, we are one of the most diverse cities in all of Canada. People are surprised by that, but we jockey back and forth between the third and fourth most diverse city in Canada, which is something that we should celebrate. But there are complexities in serving the community with that, and one of them was when we conducted the EQAO assessment, and we had many students who weren't it's not that they weren't capable, they just weren't ready to write that assessment at that time. So I see that as a real feather, and that's been achieved. But we're also trying to acclimatize our staff and understanding that because everybody has written before, right? So we're really helping people with the guides for our administrators and our teachers in terms of making sure the fidelity of that is implemented. For example, a student should not be writing if they cannot read independently. That's a big difference. Yeah, that's a big difference. And so, again, helping our staff to understand that have fidelity with the test the way it is now. So that's going to show up different in scores moving forward. Mm-hmm. So
supplemental, that's not like an accommodation thing for a scribe. That's who cannot
read.
Kind of regular support with special education support.
So, for example, an ELD, and a perfect example that would come to mind is an ELD student who is step 1, right? Yeah, so that's a good thing. So there's lots of changes. It's going to take us a while. It's still called EQAO, but it is different. So it's going to take us a while. So this is the first drawing in the sand, and we need to now work from there in developing the strategies and implementing those strategies with fidelity to do the work and being able to measure accordingly oranges to oranges or apples to apples. So it's a big change.
Quickly, Trustee Chin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate all the endeavor that you have done, and including the teachers. And what I mean is that I'm not talking about any good things you have done. It's obviously I want to pinpoint what shortcomings we should focus to improve our future education. And what I have seen is that we have a lot of excuses, and we are not really, finding out the main reason. And if there is any lack or gap that we can fill and to make improvement. And as for the test, EQAO test, excuse me. Sorry. As for the test, it's a standard test. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I mean, all the factors and barriers you mentioned actually happen all across the board, all province. They are all new to the software. And but compared with the provincial level, our performance is lower. Is lower than the standard. So I'm not criticizing, but we need to find out the real reason and what resource we can use to improve that. And I mentioned PD Days is one resource. Another is that we see a lot of parents, their feedback. For example, I think there are too many initiatives focus on basics, reading, writing, math, and arts.
Trustee Chin, do we have a
Our
question?
education's,
We just need a question.
yeah.
Please,
So
more
yeah,
time.
a lot of parents concerns that we have too much distraction. We are not focusing back on the quality education and student achievements. So we should try to, ask why they have such concerns and what's our performance and if we can improve. That's what we hope. And obviously, we all want to get together to improve the education, to protect the kids, to improve their achievement. So I think we should focus more on how to improve instead of excuse. Thank you.
Anything to add?
Okay, so I think what you've asked is that you feel, thank you for the compliments for the work of the teachers and the work of the collective team in doing that. And yes, I do believe that everybody wants the same desired result. I honestly, I'm not making excuses. I'm telling you what's happening in schools, and they're happening across schools across the province. But I will give you an example that it's not evident when you see the data. So if you go back to the slide from mathematics, the very first slide, here's something that doesn't come out in this. So it says there, look at the secondary response. So when the assessment was given originally before the pandemic, they divided academic and applied students, 88% and 52%. But then they've merged them with the de-streamed math, and it's 54%. So that looks like dismal when you first look at it. And I was part of meetings with directors across the province in EQAO, and there was a pushback from school districts about that. But here's something that you wouldn't know when you looked at that. Every single student in our board that wrote the grade 9 assessment passed. Everyone. Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually very good. They all passed the assessment. And we are 2% above the provincial average. So I know when you're looking at the data, you really need to dig into it to know what's happening. And I can't stress enough the impact that the pandemic had on social emotional needs with students reintegrating into school. And I say the comment of Maslow before Bloom, we need to take care of people. We need to take care of our students. And of course, the focus of the work is the instruction of mathematics and literacy. And nobody's making excuses. It's difficult work, again, large scale in a system, and there's implications that's happening. So if that's interpreted as excuses, I'm interpreting it as a reality. When we can't conduct professional development, that's problematic. When we can't release teachers to engage in professional conversation, that's problematic. When students have mental health issues that it's difficult for integration into the classroom, it's problematic. Nobody is deliberately putting any distractors in the way of doing the work, because that is the work in our classrooms. Teachers are coming to work every day and focusing on math, focusing on literacy, earnestly focusing on reading. Reading has been really well implemented because we didn't have to rely. We had an internal mechanism of release for teachers this year. So that didn't stop. That's where you're seeing the big progress happening. But other items, we've had to cancel things. And I'm not blaming anyone. It's the circumstance that we're in. So it becomes challenging. I fully agree with you. That is the work. It has always been the work. It's just some days it's more difficult than others. And it's the time we need to find alternative ways of bringing that learning to teachers and alternative ways to provide them support for that small group instruction in the classroom. And that too, as there's been some announcements with the GSN around that. And again, we need to be really focused on the resources that we have. And that work is happening right now to plan forward.
Thank you so much for all of your work and
Thank
all
you.
of that knowledge. I would